I was getting up in the morning before school, working out and going to the courts. Every day after school, I was playing Bollettieri Tennis Academy. It's the top 200 juniors in the world. So I applied there and they really put me through the ringer. They're like, look, you're not ranked. Tell us why we should take you. Well, I'm a Boy Scout. I have a passion. I want to go pro. And if I don't make it on that pro tour, I want to teach tennis. And, I'm going to outwork anybody that goes there.
Hi, guys. Well, welcome to the next episode of the Eighth Gear podcast, where we talk about creating your best life. Your host, our co-host, Sabron Walker and
Joe Ferracci.
And we are welcoming Mr. Myles Binford. You are the founder and owner of Binford Mortgage. This is going to be a great one because Myles has got a very interesting life story, and it relates right back to sports and tennis, which we love. All right, let's jump into it. So welcome, Myles. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us the story here.
So I was born at a very young age.
You were. Good,
yes.
Good beginning.
And from there, I have lived all over the U.S. When I was about 12 years old, I picked up a tennis racket. And I was late.
I was going to say, that's late, right?
Yeah. The reason why I picked it up is because I thought it was kind of a sissy sport.
Yeah, I had a friend in high school, and I was a football player, even though I'm really small, actually. but I was a quarterback, so it worked. But we had a tennis player in our cool dudes group, and we all thought, I shouldn't say what we thought at the time, but it was considered that in high school for me too.
I looked at it, he was getting tennis lessons. I'm like, what are you doing getting tennis lessons? I was into soccer and karate and, boys stuff, right? Yeah. And he goes, why don't you come with me? So I go over there and I watch him. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of fun. And I pick up a racket and he's like, yeah, let's hit a little bit. I started to hit and I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me? I could not get 2 out of 3 balls were going out of the court. I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, let me see if I can do this. And I figured out I actually could not do the sport. And that's what glued me to it. I was like, that's it. This is the one thing I can't do. This is crazy. It took me a while to actually figure it out, and it became an obsession.
I took my boys to the Miami Open. So my one son is a hardcore basketball fan, and the other is the tennis. Yeah. Let's call him a prodigy.
Sure.
I want to call him a prodigy. My 14-year-old who's into basketball is like, tennis, man, that's not a sport. So we actually got into this full-blown debate on what requires more athleticism, football, basketball, or tennis. And he's like, oh, you can't compare football to tennis. I said, you're right. You can't compare a 300-pound linebacker to a guy that can hit a ball over his shoulder and lunge from one side to another. You're right. Yeah. And so it was just, about like tennis being a sport. It's we play it. It requires immense athleticism.
Yeah. It's one of the most difficult sports there is.
That 12-year-old now became, you got obsessed with it. Where did it take you?
Well, I got obsessed with it. I was living in Northwest Arkansas, so that's where I was growing up. And it was a retirement, a vacation village. So it was well set up. There's golf courses everywhere. And, I just kind of grew up retired. And, it took me a while to overcome that, which became my, entrepreneurship. Well, that was a correction to how I grew up because I grew up retired. And school didn't mean much to me at that time. Something I had to do, I was forced to do, but my purpose was like, okay, tennis, how good could I get? Fast forward 1 year, I was getting up in the morning before school, working out and going to the courts. Every day after school, I was playing. Later going to what was Bollettieri Tennis Academy. It's the top 200 juniors in the world.
So but at this point, were your intentions to see if, hey, maybe I can make a life out of this?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It was like, this was something that I had purpose for. When I was 15, I was like, hey, I need to go to the best, and I need to play with the best players. And I realized that if I could duplicate a top pro that I liked, or multiple top pros, if I could duplicate their stroke and hit the ball like them, the ball would actually do what the top pro would do. I didn't have to understand it yet. So if I could just duplicate over and over and over again. And so naturally, I liked Andre Agassi at that point. He was brand new when I was like 13. And
My favorite player, by the way, of all time, Andre Agassi.
Yeah.
To this day.
And I've got some great stories about him.
Ah.
And then there was also Lindell. It's like if you were looking at Lindell at the time, Lindell had like this very amazing, this backhand that was unkillable. So I was watching all these different players come up, and I was like, okay, well, Agassi, I kind of latched onto him as like, okay, this is going to be like my mentor or whatever, like somebody that I could look up to and I could say, okay, good, let me just practice with those strokes. And so I kind of developed my own style, which was funny because my style was very much like Andre's. I had a two-handed backhand, and it just felt more natural.
So you applied to am I saying that right?
IMG?
Well,
IMG.
yeah, before it was IMG, it was Bollettieri Tennis Academy.
Okay.
Yeah, so I applied there, and they really put me through the ringer. They're like, look, you're not ranked. Tell us why we should take you. And I said, look, well, I'm a Boy Scout. I have a passion, and I want to go pro. And if I don't make it on that pro tour, I want to teach tennis. So it's something I want to do. And, I'm going to outwork anybody that goes there. And let's do a trial period. So they said, okay, good. You can come for 6 months. And what was interesting that happened there is, the first 2 weeks I was there, I happened to meet Andre Agassi. And I said, okay, this is it. I'm going to hustle. And it was a cold water dip in some respects because it was the first time I had actually gotten an international school, right? So it was a culture shock. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm completely overwhelmed. Right.
Speak to the confidence. Like, what does it take? And I'd like to say that, at that young of an age, we're somewhat naive to the challenges of life, right?
Sure.
And there's a lot of people in business and wanting to become entrepreneurs that have this mindset, it's a little too late. Starting tennis at 12 in that sport in general, you could argue that's on the late side, right? You have this desire to pursue it, and you have this confidence to say, hey, put me on this like trial run. Did you knowingly have that confidence?
It was the confidence that actually got me through a lot in this life. Yeah, nobody could say I couldn't do something. And if they did, it would fuel me.
And I think entrepreneurs have that mindset. It's common to us, but I don't know that it's common.
No, it's not common because most people look at it and go, yeah, I agree with them. I can't.
And it's funny because we had but we had a conversation. We actually had our niece on the podcast, and she's going to college right now in the University of Toronto. That mindset is actually driven into the college kids today and the high school kids today, and that 20-something personality. The professors and the schools and the media are driving it into them that they are not at cause.
And there's many reasons for that because a lot of the college professors are, they failed at whatever they were really trying to do. And so they decided to be a college professor. I can speak a little bit of intelligently like that because my dad was a triple PhD. He ran junior colleges. And he was one of the deans of Utah State. I got to see him, and his educational mindset. And, he was a Democrat and, whatever. He's a solid guy, very, very smart guy. The mindset he gave me that he was more like, I've done it wrong, so let's see what you can do. Now,
I've done it wrong, and he was a triple PhD.
Yeah. But that's pretty admirable that he would say that to you.
I was the youngest of 6 kids.
Okay.
So the first 5, he's like, I've done it wrong. Let's just see what you can do. I'll give you some freedom. I said, great.
Oh my gosh.
Give me some freedom. I mean, I got away with murder. But at the end of it, I figured things out. I figured out where my limits were or where I allowed my limits to be. Back to when I was at Bollettieri. So here I was at Bollettieri for the first 6 months, working my tail off. I got to be friends with Andre Agassi.
So are you hitting with him at this point?
Well, not yet. Okay. I mean, I did, but I was just always there, and he got to know me a little bit. Okay. So it's funny, but
he's a mentor. He's not a peer.
Right. No. He was in the top, 10 in the world at that point. He was already known as Andre Agassi. Wow. So
as you got to know Andre, he gave you something.
He did. Okay, the first thing he gave me was a racket, which I don't have here. I actually brought this racket back to my friend in Arkansas, and I was like, hey, this is pretty cool. And he was like, hey, can I keep it for like a year? Because I was going back to the academy. I was like, yeah, just keep it till next summer. So I came back the following summer, and he was like, you never said I'd give it back.
Oh my gosh.
So I hope he's watching.
Yeah.
And I hope it's in good shape because I'm going to come get it. It was cool. It was a red Donné racket, and it's very similar to the one I have here. I can show you my racket. So this was my stick at the time. So
Okay, those are classics because I don't even remember the last time I saw something
4.5
anything
grip,
remotely
the whole
close.
thing, So, and in fact, I strung this a little different because I used to use Kevlar in the center. So you have like the main string being Kevlar. This stick is the same thing that he gave me, but it was the orange one. So you had this big orange, racket. So, and it said on the side, instead of Donné or Pro 1, it said Andre Agassi. Oh. So custom sticks, and they were numbered, and it was like 163 or something like that. So that's how many, sticks he had gone through.
I'd get that racket back from your friend.
Yeah.
We'll see.
He's still in Arkansas. I got tabs on him. So that was the first thing he gave me was a racket. And then the next thing he gave me, so after that, I had this thing about his necklace. So he had the necklace, which was this triangle with 3 interlocking circles. And there was something about that. I was like, man, that is the coolest symbol ever. And it's just like something stuck with me. So I was there and I was like, Andre, how do I get one of those? He said, well, it's really, it's kind of closed. It's this closed group, and it's Bollettieri, and his daughter or sister or something like that designed it, and it was based on the Trinity, so it was a Father, Son, Holy Spirit type of thing, and it was just this patented thing, and it's a jeweler that's another tennis pro that actually makes them. And so as time went on, one day he came back, he goes, yeah, you can have this. So here it is. If you want to take a look at it.
Look at that.
So it is a triangle with 3 interlocking circles. The jeweler on that later, as time went on, he started selling them. So you can actually buy one now.
So this is one that he wore.
No. That's a custom. That was one that was based off of the whole template and all of that. And so the jeweler actually gave it to me with the permission of Andre. Yeah, so now it's my family crest in a way, or our family symbol. So my daughter has one. She's living here. She has a female's version, which is smaller, and so it's like everybody in our family gets them.
Beautiful.
Very cool.
So yeah.
So how do you transition? You're 15, 16.
Yeah.
And no longer with aspirations of, let's say, being a pro?
I had to go back to high school while I was there. So I was going to a private school, which was part of the academy. And then for whatever reason, I needed to go to the high school, which is across the street. So I went to the high school across the street. And then like any other teenager, I started getting in trouble. There was a division there. Like I started to lose focus, and I was partying with friends, and I didn't really, it's like I lost the motivation. And then I started losing tournaments. So up to that point, I was a rising star. And then I just started to have too many losses. And then I was going off the rails. So, it was all self-created at that point. And, since then, I understand, everything that occurred, so it really was when I was about almost 18 is about the time that I was like, okay, I'm done.
At 16, 17, were there a few things that happened, or was there one single thing that just led you to say, man, I can't do this? Or
there was 2 things. Yeah. I mean, the first was I was held back by the system. Right? Specifically, their system was that they had groups, and you had 10 groups. And so you test into the group. But once you're in that group, you're in that group for an entire month. And then the top 3 of those players could test to go to the next higher group. Now, that's added a lot of runway for somebody that can actually progress really fast. Right. So they expected a lot of these kids to kind of get into a group and take time to either move up or down. So there wasn't like a fast track towards success. That suppression suppressed my ability to just, fast track it. What I ran into is I just got stopped. Stop. And then I just lost interest. I was like, okay, I can't progress any further. But yet on the side here, I was playing with, group 2, group 1 players as friends, and these pros that I was always hanging out with, like Agassi, and I wasn't playing with him a lot. I mean, Pete, I was training with them, so they would come into town, I would train with them, Pete Sampras was always in the gym. One time I had heat stroke and he helped save me. He was pouring ice on me. This is Pete Sampras, right? Pouring ice on me.
Yeah.
And, I'm sitting there with 102 fever and, shaking and stuff like that. And he was saving my butt. So thanks, Pete. But when it came to the academy, I was stopped by the system. Maybe they've changed it since then, because I could play. And at the end of that second year, I had beaten the kid that was actually moving into Group 1, and the Group 1 are the touring pros. So I played him and just on the cuff, and it was 2 out of 3 sets, and I beat the crap out of him. But then I go back and they're like, okay, well, you're going to be in Group 5.
That's disheartening.
Okay, so you're going to stop me for the next 6 months while I rank up. Yeah, so I'm like, this isn't going to get me into the top pros. So I started going, why is this? And I realized that, there's a whole business behind it. Like Tommy Haas was number 1 in Europe when he came over to the academy. So it's already kind of given that they're gonna cater to these top kids. But if you have somebody like me that's coming out of nowhere, I was like, hey, but here I am on the side court playing with these guys. Okay, what's to say that they're not going to invest in me? It's just because I don't have the credentials. I didn't have the stats. The sponsors and all of that are going to be going towards who's got the ranking or the connections.
And is it really different nowadays?
No, it's IMG is now a very large school of sports. They take soccer and football, and they have tennis, but I think that's a smaller sport part of their overall thing. While what they do is amazing, and it has a business aspect to it for sure, and it can be suppressive for somebody in my shoes at that, like what I ran into. Well, and Jim Courier also complained about it because Jim was overlooked.
Oh, really?
So if you look at Jim Courier's history, here's this kid who had a baseball swing, amazing player. And later he became number 1 in the world for a while, and he was just killing everybody. And his big upset with the industry was what occurred at the academy, being overlooked. He spoke about it a lot. I think it's in one of his books. And he's obviously worked to maybe try to correct that.
This suppression that you're talking about, that you experienced as a teenager.
Sure.
That exists in the business world today. How does one who's in business handle that suppression?
Depends on the situation. So, fast forward today, I have a mortgage company. I've had multiple companies I've started in multiple fields, right? I ran a detox program. I got people off of psychiatric meds. We became one of the largest in the country. I did that for 6 years, and I did that with no history. I had a building in Laguna Beach, California, and I was like, what am I going to do with this building? The market just crashed, and so I was looking at it like, it's beautiful. It's a great place to stay, and I just used my intuition and asking questions. One thing I learned is that you got to ask questions, to get into that field and continue with that idea of like, well, I'm going to do something until somebody says I can't, and so I ended up building multiple businesses from that perspective. So how do you handle the suppression? Look at who's suppressing you. Why are they suppressing you? Is there a personal benefit for them suppressing you, or is it because of their own failures? Really analyze that suppression and just don't internalize it. You really find that suppression is really not about you. It's really about the source of the suppression, right? So it's pretty easy to handle suppression like that.
You got to have this sense of resiliency.
Where do you think that self-confidence comes from that it makes an entrepreneur able to do it?
Conquering fear at a young age.
Yeah.
When I was 3, 4, 5, I was terrified. I was terrified of everything, terrified of life. Yeah. I didn't come with a roadmap. I didn't come with any of that. So at some point there, I realized, well, the only thing I'm afraid of is just what could happen. So why don't I just find out what happens? And I kept chasing that down. Well, what is going to happen? I'm just holding myself back.
It's interesting. I was watching, is it that entrepreneurial trainer, was his name Ron Paul? Is that a guy? But he said it's a famous quote, I think, but he says, as soon as you can change, there's nothing that can stop you. Until you can recognize that you're the one sticking yourself, then, but that entrepreneurial ability or that to conquer everything is as soon as you can realize it's inside yourself.
The ability to assess and adjust.
Right.
I tell my 12-year-old
And the ability to self-reflect.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, it's like, no animal's ever asked a question. So I realized that the more questions you ask, the smarter you are. I started to look at some of my friends who are not doing as well in life, or they're having trouble with a certain thing. They're kind of like internalizing and saying, okay, well, I'm gonna keep working at this without asking the question. I'm like, why aren't you asking questions? If you're not getting to where you're going as fast as you can, why don't you ask why? And so it's always a personal policy of mine to ask as many questions as possible. The biggest problem with entrepreneurs, in my estimation, it's funny, because we fall in love with our own ideas, and that's always the wrong place to go. Who cares if you love this new concept? You're like, oh, I've got the greatest idea. I'm going to do this, and I'll build this app for it, and people are going to, it's like, great. Okay, well, number one, you just failed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good to have a good idea, but let's just survey 100 people, and let's just see if that's what they need. Ask 100 chiropractors, what is your most painful problem? Oh, well, blah, 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 blah. And you're going to find a consistent thing. There may be 20% of them are like, my most painful problem is blah, 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 blah. And maybe it's something you can solve.
It's such a huge thing.
Yeah, the more pain, the more clients you're going to have. The more people are going to need it. And, as an entrepreneur, I can come up with a million ideas. I mean,
Right.
I already have.
Right.
But there's only a few that I surveyed and said, okay, good, I'm going to build this.
And you have to love what you do too, because I love marketing and PR and communicating and helping people in that way.
Yeah.
And so that pain point is easy for me to jump in and love solving for you.
Sure.
But that isn't for everybody.
But, I love what I do. Actually, as a mortgage broker, I actually love it. I mean, I have my realtors that work with me, they send me business. I really don't have to market it all at this point. And because we consistently have a great product, the realtor can send their client to me. They know it's just going to get done. If I say it can get done, it's going to get done. It gets done every time. They can trust that. That's a painful problem for a realtor. Of course, I'm always trying to expand in other ways. I've built a CRM at this point, for mortgage brokers that solve problems that I've seen over the last, decade. And so I actually have this. I'm about to launch it. But it's based off of the painful problem that I have seen consistently that people are asking for the solution.
It's a great way and a great basis for implementing, structuring, and creating a successful business. And it's applicable to even oneself.
Yeah.
I've been asked a myriad of times, what's the formula for success? And you're pretty much underlying what it is. And so, well, what's the problem that you're trying to solve for self? Where's your starting point? I don't know. I just know I want it to look like this, but I don't know where to start. And I'm like, let's keep this simple. We don't have to overly complicate it. And I'll tell you, the first thing that you need to understand and educate yourself on is, what is the difference between making money and creating cash flow. Let's just start there.
Yeah.
Inevitably, if your focus is just making money, at some point that's going to have an end. Whereas if you put that same energy, time, and effort in figuring out how to create cash flow, that's going to lead to residual. Yeah, I think a lot of you might agree with this, is a lot of entrepreneurs overly complicate.
Oh, for sure. Because really all you need to do is solve a small problem for somebody, and you can do it in great quantity.
And then replicate it.
Like a $40 solution to a problem is very simple, and then you just replicate and replicate and replicate, and you have your niche. A lot of people will get into an area and just say, okay, I want to build an app. It's like, well, are you an expert? If they're not, it's really, how serious can you take the guy? I've found that if you're an expert in an area, you're a professional. Well, that's when the opportunities open up. So a lot of people are like, I want to be an entrepreneur, and they just kind of go wherever they're going, and they don't really create that dream because they get stopped by this barrier, and it's the lack of familiarity with the subject. I really recommend that someone be very familiar with the subject so that they can ask the intelligent questions or the stupid questions that will lead them to solving the painful problem. Yeah?
I absolutely love what you're saying.
You need to be a professional at whatever you're doing. And then, if you're a professional at 10 things, well, you've got 10 streams of income. But it's that trust that comes with being a professional, right? See, I'm a professional at mortgage lending. I'll go toe to toe with any lender out there. I know guidelines, right? And because of that, my realtors trust me, and they're never going anywhere else. I just talked to one today, and she was like, "You're the best." I'm like, thank you.
There you
I
go.
earn that every day.
And that helps in
You know?
self-confidence and keeps
Yeah.
powering it.
I don't need to hear that I'm the best other than the fact that I've earned it today.
Do
I'm
you
going to earn
work-
it tomorrow.
Do you work with investors?
When it comes to residential real estate.
Okay.
So if you're dealing with commercial, I'm not the expert.
And are you primarily, so I ask this only because I know a slew of investors
Yeah.
and foreign nationals that are looking to, work with good,
Yeah.
reputable lenders
Right.
in the U.S.
I mean, if the foreign nationals are buying here in Florida, then, or actually I can do a foreign national pretty much in any state, but it has to be an investment property. It has to be residential, or, any other investor. Yeah. I'm happy to work with anyone.
My niche is being able to work with foreign nationals
Awesome.
globally. I
Awesome.
came as a Canadian to the U.S.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, there's a hell of a thing to be said about figuring out, how to structure your assets
Yeah.
and creatively engineer deals
Yeah.
because you're a foreigner. And I'm sure you would agree similarly to your experience in tennis. At the time, I'm thinking, God, I'll look at an American. We have the same culture. We're speaking the same language. I've got these barriers. This isn't
Yeah.
fair. And I look back at that time, and that was probably the best thing that could have happened to me because it seriously forced me to creatively structure everything and understand that in business, it's not always like this.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you have to do this to get to the same destination.
Yeah. I mean, for example, Canadians, it's funny because there's a border right there. But as a Canadian wanting to buy real estate here in Florida, it's like, yeah, I want to get a house down here. I was like, great. Well, you're a foreign national. Yeah, that's 25% down. But it's really not because there's RBC Bank, right? RBC Bank is between both Canada and the U.S. And with that, you can get a conventional loan. So I always refer Canadians over to RBC.
Well, almost 30 years ago when I was doing it, that wasn't the case.
It wasn't the case.
Yeah.
Now it's the case. It's you're a foreigner.
Yeah.
You're going to have a 25% down, and it's got to be an investment property and, on and on. So there's so many guidelines now,
And I bring that point up for the sole purpose of not necessarily how challenging it was getting the loan, but just to share with the people that are listening to a podcast like this, you're going to run into barriers in business. And that was my biggest challenge and my biggest barrier. And, setting up my corporate entity and getting loans. I got to a point where banks were telling me, wait a sec, you have 30 mortgages and you're 20, how old? And how did you get these things?
Yeah.
As a foreigner? I had to explain to them.
Yeah.
I'll share a quick story. A very good friend of mine who worked at a bank in Western New York, went to him. I hadn't gotten conventional financing at this point in a long time. And I said, listen, I really want to explore. The interest rates at the time were really good. I said, I'd like to explore conventional financing. I haven't received a conventional financing loan and I don't even know how long, but I'd like to see if it's viable and possible. And he's like, oh, I don't see why it wouldn't. At that point, I already had moved to the US. And he said, all right, let's pull your credit. Pulled my credit. He goes, you have a phenomenal score. I can easily get you a loan. No problem. Everything's verifiable. Give him my tax returns, which kind of read like an encyclopedia set. And he said, wait a second. I pulled your credit and you have 2 mortgages that show up, but yet you have a couple of 100 loans in your tax return. How is this possible? I said, remember when I told you the story about how I had to get real creative? I did a lot of vendor back financing. I started dealing with private lenders, keeping the existing mortgage in place.
Right.
And this is a banker that said to me, I need for you to mentor me.
That's awesome.
I need to do what you're talking about, which is creating residual cash flow and building an asset base. And he went on, and I won't mention names, but I just chuckled, said his name, and I said, don't you work for the bank? There's like, you have access to a myriad of products. And he just said, yeah, nah, I agree with what you're doing. And to this day, I just, I look back at that and I chuckle because.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But it's
a good story,
I again, like I bring up the fact that if it wasn't for those barriers and probably what you had experienced in seeing the suppression in tennis, maybe that would not have led to your success in business. You observed, you saw it for what it was, and you're able to like see it and target it now, and not have it impact who you are and the viability of your business.
This term eustress, there's stress and eustress. Eustress is positive stress. Like trees, they did this experiment where trees grew and there was no wind and anything like that. And eventually these trees grew to their full length. They fell over. There was no stress so that they got stronger. So trees or humans or whoever needs that positive stress in order to become stronger, right? And that's what we're really talking about here is that eustress. For me, being told by my 6th grade teacher that I wasn't going to be anything more than a Walmart worker, to, what I dealt with at the tennis school, to also being, I grew up retired. I was retired until I realized I was not retired and I needed an education. I needed to be smart about stuff. I needed to ask questions. I need to figure this whole thing out. And I realized that I shot myself in the foot. It was an internal debate I had with myself. It's like, I need to do it or I'm going to end up like what they're saying. I don't want to be the tree that falls over.
No, let's hit you with the fast, what do we call it?
Let's do it.
The 8 rapid fire questions.
Okay, let's hit you with the 8th gear rapid fire questions. Here we go. I'll start it out.
All right.
The booklet influenced your life the most.
Dianetics.
Most defining moment of your business career.
When she told me that I needed to understand the guidelines. My business career as a mortgage broker, that was the key difference between anything else. So yeah.
Favorite movie?
God, I had like 50 of them just fly through my head. I don't know. The Avengers one, it just came to mind. Yeah, the Endgame or whatever.
I was going to say, yeah, okay.
Favorite food to eat?
Sushi.
What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Oh my God. It's going to be okay, dude. It's going to be okay. You'll figure it out.
I love that.
Learn to learn faster.
What motivates you?
The sense of accomplishment for whatever it is, it's like a job well done. Looking back and going, wow, that's cool. I mean, there's like family, there's my personal goals. I'm going to be doing something pretty wild later. I do plan on sailing the world. What motivates me? It's sense of adventure, the sense of overcoming things that I'm not sure if I could but it sounds cool. Let's do it. Let's get in trouble.
Let's do it anyways.
Yeah, let's see what happens, right? So it's that enthusiasm for living life. I think that is really what it is. It's that internal fire of like, let's have some fun.
I love that.
Yeah.
Let's have you back on for sure as soon as you're ready to take off around the world on a catamaran.
Oh, you better believe it.
I want to definitely hear about that.
Yeah.
Well, great. It's been fantastic to have you on the 8th Gear podcast. Thank you, Myles.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, man.
Yeah, it's been
Appreciate
great.
it.
Thanks for watching. If you like this episode of the 8th Gear podcast, definitely like, subscribe, give us some comments below that we will respond to, and turn on notifications for future episodes. Have a great one.